I got into this field because I started meditating 20 years ago. And what I found was that there was a whole world of inspiration and joy. And it's a wonderful way to connect with yourself and your body and to find kind of your own personal truth. And as a therapist, how I like to orient myself is helping other people find their own personal truth. I think a lot of times, this is my personal mission, is that a lot of times we give away our ownership for our spirituality and our health to different professionals, different spiritual leaders, and really we have it right here in the core of us, if we can just figure out how to identify it. And so what I have found working with different clients and patients and friends and children is that they have an inner truth and they can find it. And it's like their own connection. So my first child was born in 1984, and in 1986, the author Bernie Siegel came out with a book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles. And I had been brought up in a non-traditional kind of non-religious family. The protocol was to be atheist, agnostic. But what Bernie Siegel said was people who have faith live longer. People who have faith can fight disease better. I was kind of like, whoa. And then right after that, my parents both died of cancer in their 60s, and they were not people of faith. So that hit me in a big way. So that's kind of my personal story and how I orient myself. And so right now, the science is coming to support all of these experiences, really, and what Libby just said, is that if we, all right, what am I doing? Which button do I want to push next? If we pay attention to our mind, body, and spirit and integrate them, we have a much better chance of healing and a much better chance of living a fulfilling life. Researchers have found that there's a bidirectional influence between the health of the mind and the body. When the body feels bad, the mind starts to feel bad. When the mind feels bad, the body starts to feel bad. There's all sorts of research about how depression just helps you get worse. And if you can find a positive outlook on life, you're a lot more likely to become more healthy. The Center for Disease Control has found that emotions play a part in 85% of physical ailments. Stress has been linked to slower wound healing. Depression weakens the immune system. Lack of social support can foster illness. How many of us have felt like this, like on a daily basis? And that just totally builds on itself. And then you snap at your dog, and your dog bites your kid, and you know. So this is the model that shows what happens with a major life event, short-term challenges, chronic strains, environmental exposures, cataclysmic events. Thank you. So recently on Facebook, there's a little thing by Brene Brown going around about being a blamer. And she talks about how her husband, her husband forgot to do the grocery shopping or something, and it made her spill on her clothes. And, and then it was all his fault that she was having a bad day. And we can really build a scenario for that. And you just kind of go through all of your days saying, well, if only this had happened, if only this had happened. And at some point, you have to say, I'm going to take responsibility for my life and how I live it. So here's Bernie Siegel in his book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles. He found that terminal patients broke down into 3 categories. 15 to 20% unconsciously or consciously wish to die to escape their problems. 60 to 70% would be stellar patients and do exactly what their physicians told them to do. 15 to 20% were exceptional patients and refused to be victimized by their illness. 75% of patients with a fighting spirit experienced a 10-year survival rate, while only 22% of those with stoic acceptance, helplessness, or hopelessness lived that long. So instead of studying what created illness, he started to study what created wellness, what made an exceptional patient. Exceptional patients were proactive and took ownership of their healing process and challenged their doctors. He told stories of walking down the ward and wanting to avoid that patient who said, "What do you have to say to me about this?" And so many of us are programmed to bow to authorities and not claim that personal ownership for our personal health. They cleared their lives of the activities that did not serve a zeal for living. They sought to live a life of unconditional love. They knew that happiness was an inside job, so instead of being blamers, they took responsibility for how they were feeling. They pursued unorthodox treatment modalities. All of us are wired just a little bit differently. All of us have just a little bit of a different physiology. And we have to take responsibility if eating glutens makes us feel crappy, or if, we have a dairy intolerance, whatever. They use pain and problems as opportunities for growth and redirection. So I don't know how we could have picked a better sequence than Libby than me or whatever. So the power of suggestion, while not a panacea, is a worthy ally of pharmacy, surgery, and hygiene. And I hadn't even considered using my kids as examples during this talk. But when my kids were babies and I was hearing about Bernie Siegel, I was a single mother with a son, and I thought I would run an experiment. And my experiment was, if I told my children that they were beautiful and smart, and if I changed them in front of a mirror every day and said, "You're so beautiful, you're so smart," what would happen? I just thought I'd run an experiment. I thought, isn't that what everybody needs to know, right? That they are beautiful and smart? So it might have been too big of a responsibility, but my 31-year-old son already has a tenured teaching position in Japan at university. So he totally believed it. And my 27-year-old daughter went to grad school in London and lives that really adventuresome life. So, you just want to live a life of hope and optimism and potential and allowing. And if you can do that, it's amazing what might happen. And it's kind of a step-by-step process. I didn't think it was going to matter. And of course, I didn't do all that hard work that my son did. But he really believes in himself. Healing is a creative act, said Bernie Siegel, calling for all the hard work and dedication needed for other forms of creativity. You kind of have to. Did anybody see the Chihuly at the Denver Botanic Gardens? And I made my friends go, and then I said, and now you have to watch the film. And the film was so great because he talked about going to camp every summer outside of Seattle. And he said, and the best part was all the mistakes we made, all the glass that we broke, because then we found out how we wanted to proceed. So we get so hung up about the mistakes, and mistakes aren't a life sentence. It's just information about how we want to go forward next. And it is a creative process. And we are also geared to doing it right the first time that I think sometimes we miss all the opportunity from what happens when we screw up. If we aren't already wired that way, how do we become exceptional patients and creative healers? Well, that's kind of what my work is about. It's about helping you find that internal truth for yourself. But there is some science to direct us. What they're finding is, they did studies in Florida about mothers with postpartum depression, and what they found was that massage, music, and meditation all helped those women create serotonin in their body. We have our own personal little pharmacopoeia inside of us, and we can help stimulate our own immune system and our moods. Richard Davidson, he's a PhD, and he studies the Dalai Lama's monks at UW-Madison. And instead of taking on the pharmaceutical industry head on and saying SSRIs might not work as well as you think, he studied the recidivism of patients with depression. So if you've had one major depressive episode, you're likely to have another. And what he found was that people who practice mindfulness, which is the idea that we're going to stay in the present, we're going to say, okay, I'm sitting here with a lot of high energy people who want to heal, and I'm just going to absorb myself into this environment and listen and be present. If you're thinking about how your food tastes when you're eating it, if you're thinking about the water hitting your body and experiencing that when you're taking a shower, instead of thinking about, oh, I've got this meeting in an hour and it's going to be a little stressful, mindfulness practitioners halved, cut in half the rate, more than cut in half the rate of recidivism for depression versus SSRIs. It's more effective, twice as effective as SSRIs in preventing recurrent bouts of depression. So I'm talk about a little nerdy. This is a 24-hour series, the great courses, The Spiritual Brain Science and Religious Experience by Dr. Andrew Newberg, who is he's a research physician at Jefferson Medical Center in Philadelphia. And he kind of took the whole idea of Joseph Campbell, us living our own myth, and connected it with our physiology and our religious beliefs. And what they found is that when you combine experiences, like when you combine a stressful experience with a bigger picture concept, like the Moses story, and if you can see yourself in terms of a Moses story when you're under a lot of pressure, you can create like an epiphany in your body. Epiphanies happen, and then you make all of these connections, and you feel really lit when that happens. You feel like maybe you can handle a new life. You can create a new way to be. So I had a little client early in the year who was not going to be with me very long. I had about a month to make a difference. She was going to move out of town. She'd had really severe depression. She had 2 autistic children, and she said, and I lost my temper when my daughter got up and peed on the floor. And she said, and my husband told me I was out of control and it was my fault. And I said, it might be a normal response for you to be upset when your autistic child every day pees on the floor. And so really what you want, maybe, is to find a way to be that serves you and to forgive yourself. And so she said, well, I just feel so depressed. And I said, well, what does your depression look like? And she said, I feel like I'm at the bottom of a well. And I said, well, okay. When she told me what her strengths were, she said that she was a really good writer. And I said, okay, so this is your assignment for when you come back. I want you to write yourself out of the bottom of that well. And it changed her whole demeanor the next time when she came back. She had a lot of hope then, because she had created a story for herself that was inspiring. And she shifted herself out of depression, and she found that she could handle a lot more days of her autistic child peeing on the floor. So I kept trying to change the slide, and it kept going back, and I don't know if I saved it the right way. But spending time in forests and natural settings help reduce cortisol production, help reduce negative thought patterns, and it increases more rapid healing. So there's something really healing about being in nature versus concrete. I don't think they've decided exactly what it is, but they know that there's a direct correlation between the two. And then this is pretty funny. Creative projects and crafts have been found to lower heart rate and blood pressure. Now, you don't get the same effect from Pokemon games or, or even bridge. You know, the competitive games aren't it. But they're finding you can induce the relaxation response through any type of repetition, whether it's repeating a word, so like a mantra, prayer or actions, or, you know, like I got into doing the rosary. I didn't really do it. I wasn't very good at it. I couldn't make myself do it every day. It was really long. I was like, how do people do this? But things like that, it creates a doorway. It creates an opening in that repetitive mind cycle that you can shift out of it. And it's this shifting, apparently, that helps us to produce a more healthful environment for ourselves. So the act of doing a task over and over again breaks the train of everyday thought, and that's what releases stress, says Herbert Benson, the Harvard mind-body specialist. So I didn't really know how the room was going to be set up, but I was hoping for a little discussion after this. And more researchers finding that healing takes a conscious commitment where we refocus time and energy on treating ourselves in kind and creative ways. So I wanted to talk about ways that you all have found, because each of us have a higher self or a God place that speaks to us about our personal healing. And I wanted to hear some stories. Libby was so really inspirational to share hers, but we all have to start listening to ourselves and what will help us out of our issues and being at the bottom of the well. We can all write ourselves out of our situations if we want to. And if we and that's really what I help people with, is a lot of people want to, and they can see exactly where they are and exactly where they want to be, and it's creating the new behavior that needs a little support. Well, thank you very much.